There, today's learning target is the same as it was yesterday. We're going to write and interpret numerical expressions and compare expressions using a visual model. So today, instead of focusing on taking the words and writing a numerical expression, today we're going to be having numbers and we're going to write the words that would explain what's happening in that numerical expression. And hopefully I can get this to type correctly. I've been having some trouble. So let's take a look at the first one. 8 times 43 minus 13. Well, those parentheses tell me that I need to find what's inside those parentheses first. So I can say this a couple of ways. So I might say 8 times the difference of 43 and 13, or I can say find the difference of 43 and 13 and then multiply it by 8. Either one of those means the same thing. We just have to make sure that we're telling the person to find the difference first and then to multiply. Because without those parentheses there, I would be multiplying 8 times 43 first. So let me write that, or attempt to write that. So let's call this, we're going to say find the or multiply 8 times, or we don't even have to put the word multiply, we could just say 8 times 8 times the difference of 43 and 13. And that's the word form for what we have there. So let's take a look at the next one. So our next one says 16 plus 9 times 4. So again, we can say that it's very similar to the one before, but this time we're finding the sum. So let's type that as the sum of 16 and 9 and then there's a couple of ways that I could say that I want to multiply times 4. I could just say times 4. I could say 4 times, or I could say, yeah, that would be the main two ways. So I would say the sum of 16 and 9 4 times. And that's the word form for what we see in this second problem. All right, let's take a look at our third one. Our third one here says 20 times 3 plus 5 times 3. So this one's a little bit different. So we're going to type this one right here. And I'm going to think back to what I remember the problems yesterday we had. Remember when they would see a multiplication problem, we would sometimes say that was 23s. So let's write that as 23s plus 5 threes. Okay, so again, that's not the only way that we could say that. We could say the product of 20 and 3 plus the product of 5 and 3. That would be another way to say it. But that's two different ways that you could say this same problem in word form. Okay, so let's take a look at another problem. Okay, so now we're taking a look at a different kind of problem. It's asking us to draw a tape diagram for each and then compare. So I have 9 times 13, and I want to model that in a tape diagram, comparing that to 8 13s. So I'm going to start out by drawing my tape diagram, and each value inside the box is worth 13. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And so each one of those is worth 13. And I'm comparing that to a value of 8 13s. And so I have a value of 8 13s. Visually, it might be a little bit hard to see. My boxes aren't exactly the same. If you were going to do it solely on the fact of a drawing, you want to make sure those boxes are exactly the same. What I can do is look at what I know. I'm making 9 copies of 13 on the left side. This side I'm making 8 copies of 13. So if I have 9 copies of 13, that's obviously going to be greater than 8 copies of 13 because I have 1 extra copy of 13 on this side. Okay, so let's take a look at another one. This one also wants us to draw a tape diagram for each one and then make a comparison. Okay, let's start out by drawing a tape diagram to show the sum of 10 and 9 doubled. So I'm going to make this represent 10 plus 9. And then I'm going to double that. So I have 2 that are exactly the same, and they're exactly the same size. Here I'm making 2 copies of 10. And then 2 copies of 9. And again, it might be a little hard to see, but let's think about what this is telling us. This is telling me that I'm taking 10 and 9 twice. So I have 10 plus 9, and then I'm going to do that again, 10 plus 9. When I think about this one, it's telling me that I'm making 2 copies of 10, and 2 copies of 9. And I'm adding those together. Well, that's really what I'm doing here is I'm taking 10 twice, so 2 copies of 10, and 2 copies of 9, which is exactly the same thing. So these two are equal. If you're ever not sure, please, I encourage you, if you're having to compare two expressions, don't just rely on a picture. If you can't logically think it through and be confident in your answer, then just solve it. So if I have the sum of 10 and 9, that's 10 plus 9, and that's 19. And then I'm going to multiply that times 2 or add 19 to it again. Either way, that's doubled. And that gives me 38. Here I have 2 times 10 is 20, plus 2 times 9 is 18, and 20 plus 18 is 38. So those numerically, I can see that they're the same. Let's look at another one. Okay, again, we're drawing a tape diagram. This is 30 15s minus 1 15. So if I have 30 15s and I'm taking away 1 15, that leaves me with 29 15s. That's exactly what this means right here. I'm making 29 15s. So again, those two are equal. For me, it's easier to think of it this way rather than drawing a tape diagram. However, you could draw a tape diagram, so you would have 30 15s. So that's a lot of boxes. And then we're going to take away one of those 15s. And here I would have 29 boxes of 15s. And when I take one away over here, I would know that I have 29 15s left, 29 15s on the right. Okay, so let's refer back to our problem of the day. Larry claims that 14 plus 12 times 8 plus 12 and 14 times 12 plus 8 times 12 are equivalent or equal. That word equivalent means equal because they have the same digits and the same operations. Okay, so I do see 14s, 12 both times, 8 and 12 both times. They're multiplying and they're adding. So, is Larry correct? And explain your thinking. Okay, so I'm going to start out by deciding, is Larry correct? So I want to rewrite my expressions down here so I can really look and see at what I have. 14 plus 12 times 8 plus 12. And I'm comparing that to 14 times 12 plus 8 times 12. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to evaluate these two expressions to find out which one is greater than or less than, or if they are actually equal. So I'm going to start out with 14 plus 12, and I'm going to multiply that times 8 plus 12. So 14 plus 12 is 26, and I'm multiplying that times 20. So 26 times 2 is 52. 1 power of 10 here, so my answer is 520 for this first expression. My second expression is a little more challenging. If you don't know how to multiply 14 times 12, you had a two-digit number, it's okay. You can just, repeated addition works the same way. So you can make 12 copies of 14 or 14 copies of 12, and it'll give you the same information. So 14 times 12 is 8, 2, drop my 0 to hold my tens place, 4 and 1, that's going to be 168. And I'm going to add that to 8 times 12, that's 1696. And 168 plus 96 is 14, 16, 264. So now I can definitely see that they are not the same. The expressions are not the same, they're not equal. And when I think about it, it makes sense that they're not the same because here I'm taking two numbers and I'm adding them together, and then I'm going to multiply those two numbers. So I should get a bigger number because I have two smaller values that I'm adding together to come up with a larger value. But once I evaluated the expressions and solved them, that helped me to prove that they are not the same. So which expression is greater? I can definitely say that this one is greater. And I would write that one. So the 14 plus 12 times 8 plus 12 is greater than 14 times 12 plus 8 times 12. And it is how much greater? 520 minus 264 tells me that it is 6, that's 5, 256 greater. Okay. All right, so we're getting ready now to practice with our problem set. Be sure that you're asking questions and finding help if you're not understanding these. Let's give it a try and see how we can do.